This episode of Fermented Adventure the Podcast is sponsored by Brewskits, handcrafted dog treats made from spent beer grains, oats, barley, and rye. No chemical preservatives, a great source of fiber, and packed with protein. Visit brewskits.com to see the full selection of treats for your dog and your cat. Receive 15% off, no minimum purchase on your first order by typing in lowercase FA 2024 at checkout. Cheers! Hello, ladies and gentlemen, craft spirit enthusiasts, and those interested in the intoxicating world of craft distilleries, cideries, meaderies, wineries, and the occasional foray into breweries. It's Rich Shane, and welcome to Fermented Adventure, the podcast, where we bring you the fascinating people that are making the mash, fermenting, distilling, bottling, pouring, and delivering to you some of the finest libations in the world. Before we get started, here are a few housekeeping items. Thank you for bringing the podcast into wherever you are and whatever you're doing. We truly are grateful that you have chosen to listen and make us part of your day. It would mean the world to us if you left a 5-star review. This helps us climb in the rankings, and it makes it easier for others to find us. Don't hesitate to leave us your comments as well. If the podcast didn't meet your expectations, tell us why. We're always striving to improve. You can find us at fermentedadventure.com. We are on Instagram and Facebook as Fermented Adventure. Email us at fermentedadventure@gmail.com. All right, FA Nation, let's meet our guests. We're here at Wildfether Distilling in Haddonfield, New Jersey. He's Tommy Alfinito. I'm Rich Shane. Dawn Ranieri's here, and this is Fermented Adventure, the podcast. Tommy, welcome to the podcast.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Tommy, well, thanks for having us. And we have come by for cocktails. We fell in love with your cocktail program, with your spirits, and Dawn and I couldn't wait to come back and learn more about the story. Because Haddonfield is a dry town, but you're distilling here. How did all this get started?
Yeah, so this has been a long journey. It's definitely taken a couple years from like dream to kind of getting it open. I'm definitely like a business person first. So I owned a gym for 13 years that I recently sold. And I always thought it would be cool to open a brewery or something along those lines. And but there's breweries everywhere, right? So over time, I really got into Japanese whiskey when it was kind of at its peak. And I kind of enjoyed just like hunting for bottles and finding them and trying different things. So then I really started to get into whiskey from there. And I was like, oh, a distillery would be great. So I started talking around. I live in Haddonfield. It's a dry town, but they have a brewery and then a winery that recently came in. So I started talking around and said, I want to do a distillery to some people. And I kind of found out that they wanted a distillery in town. So from there, it was kind of like a 3 to 4 year plan. Like later on, I was going to do it, but it was kind of like, we want a distillery, but we really want one, and we can't really, control who comes in. So if you want to do it, you have to do it now. So then that kind of started the process from there.
Did you have any distilling experience or education to distilling?
No, I think I learned, it was just very hands-on. So like it's illegal to distill in the US. So I didn't distill in my basement or anything. I just kind of like started, let's say, making beer and like doing all of that stuff, learning about fermentation. I've always found fermentation really interesting. And then from there, just kind of trying to like learn and figure out how to do it myself. Okay, but
you have a fairly extensive setup. We were talking on the tour of the distillery downstairs. That's some fairly large equipment. And you're a fledgling distillery. When did you open? What was the official open date?
So we opened in May
of 2023.
Yeah, so we've been open 7 months.
Right.
Yeah.
And not having that experience, how did you go about selecting your equipment for this space, number one, and for the experience that you had?
Yeah, I think it was just a lot of research, like diving in, talking to a lot of people. I actually got my equipment from a company in Canada called Specific Mechanical. They were great to work with. I literally went to any distillery, talked to any owner, any distiller that would talk to me, and just tried to pick everyone's brain. And there's a lot of learning on the fly, but I think I got like 50% of it right. And then the other 50 were just kind of as I'm getting in and doing everything, I'm just kind of tweaking, and it's a little frustrating rebuying some equipment because you're like, oh, this would be better than this or whatever. But yeah, that's been pretty much it.
Yeah, because you spoke to the fact that now you're already looking at expansion. What is that going to be like for you?
Yeah, so I think our dream was always to make all the spirits. So whiskey is really my passion, and whiskey is what I want to make and spend my time on. So we do make a vodka and gin so that we have them for the tasting room. And the gin has been a pleasant surprise. People have really liked it. And that's been really cool. But whiskey is definitely my passion. So with that, when I was in the planning stages, I thought that we would be doing, I had no idea. I thought we'd be doing like a couple hundred cocktails a week. And then like, in reality, we're actually doing like 1,500 cocktails a week. So it's been a massive like increase from what I was expecting. So I plan to put away about 40 gallons of whiskey a week. And now I'm looking at that number and I'm realizing like I don't even have enough whiskey to basically fuel our tasting room.
You're going to need a bigger boat.
Yeah. So like just the general math there of like not doing that. And I went down the rabbit hole of like I could just, like we are now, I could just source indefinitely. And it makes a lot of business sense, but like my heart's just not into it. I really want, like when you come in and get a drink, it's like all of our spirits, especially our whiskey. So we just bought a warehouse, just bought a bigger still. So we'll have 2 stills. So we're already, it's crazy, like 7 months in to say, but we're already like figuring out expansion so that we can ramp it up and have enough for all of that stuff.
I think that's a testament to you and your craft and truthfully how well you're doing what you're doing. Because if you were to have asked me or Dawn when we came in here that this was at the time, I think you weren't open 6 months. It was the end of 2023. I would not have said that. I would have said, you guys have been around for a couple of years and you're really hitting your stride. You're only open for not even a year and you've hit your stride. We have had your cocktails. We love your cocktails. Talk about your bar program and the mindset there. And I mean, you took us on the tour. You're already planning your cocktails for the spring already.
Yeah. So when I was dreaming up this whole business plan, I knew I wanted to make whiskey, but I also know that like if you start a distillery and you just start making whiskey, you either have to wait like 3 or 4 years until your stuff's ready and you're just throwing a ton of money into grain and barrels and everything else, or you can start off selling, your clear spirits. And every time I looked at it, I was like, the thing that makes this make sense is the tasting room. So that was why I wanted to be in Haddonfield. That was why the building we're in was built in the 1850s. It's a really cool old building. And like the renovation was extensive and like a lot of money, but like it just fit the vision of what I wanted to do. And then for the tasting room in New Jersey, you're really supposed to make everything in-house, meaning like everything, including like bitters and everything. That's kind of how the law is written, but there's a lot of gray in there. And that I would say that's not necessarily what everyone does. A lot of people like will say like, well, I'm making the spirits and the other aspects are they can kind of bring in. And I think that's cool. There's a lot of places doing it really well. But for us, we wanted to embrace that and literally make everything. So for our bar program, we operate off seasonality. So we'll have like 4 seasonal menus in a year. We're in our winter menu right now, which just rolled out in January. And we make everything from scratch. So like, it's kind of crazy. We have a prep team that comes in and I'll come up and watch them. And like, they'll start with like, we had one drink that was a red bell pepper drink on the last menu. And they'll start with like an entire case of red bell peppers. And then I'll come back up 3 hours later and like those red bell peppers got reduced down to like 10 quart containers. And it's just crazy to think about like that's all that's left. But I think that also speaks to what we're doing with our program is like we're taking real ingredients that are locally available. And then we're getting pretty creative. I would say actually this menu, it seems like we get a little more creative with the flavors. And even now we're making like way more spirits, like we're making way other things like absinthe and fernet and stuff just for the bar program. So the way we kind of operate is like we kind of give free rein to like our team making the recipes, making the cocktails, and then we're just like come with our ideas and then we just make stuff and then we fit them into cocktails. So it might be kind of backwards, but we normally will start with like a component and then they'll be like, oh, this would be really good with something else. And then next thing you know, we're making another product. And so we're just doing that, and we're learning. So for the spring menu, which won't come out until probably April, like we're learning, like we're already making stuff. We have a ton of spring things up there already that are kind of getting research and development so that we can kind of figure out for the next menu.
You're the first and only distillery here in Haddonfield. What has the feedback been? I mean, obviously you're making 1,500 cocktails a week, but what's some of that feedback, or what are some of those moments for you, Tommy, where you just kind of stand back and watch and you think about all those ideas that were in your head and now you see them in action?
Yeah, I think one of my favorite memories was like the first week we opened. So I'm 100% like I do the distilling, the production side, and I really want to stay over there. I actually can't make a cocktail at all. And like, I don't want to learn because I don't want that to be an option for me. So we have a great team that runs everything on the bar, on like the cocktail lounge side. But the first week or two, I was helping out because we just got absolutely crushed, just being like the new thing. And one of my favorite moments was there was an older lady. She had been in her 80s, and she sat down in all this chaos around her, and she got a drink. She drank her one drink, she paid and tipped, and she was like, "Can I just talk to the owner if he's here?" And I walked over, and she was just like, "This is the best day in Haddonfield's history." And then she just left. And I was like, that's really cool. So for me, I think that's all we want to be, is like a meeting spot for everyone to come and then try out things that are like flavors that you wouldn't expect or have never really experienced.
Wildfether, no A.
Yeah.
What happened to the A? Or why does it say feather without an A?
So the name's actually for my mom, who passed when I was she passed when I was like 21. So she was like my best friend. So I knew when I was starting this business, I really wanted to name it something to do with her. So I kept going back to, there was always this story when she was growing up that she would find feathers and make them into an earring, and she would wear the earring. So that was where the feather idea came from. And then for the Wildfether without the A, honestly, it was one of those things where the business side of me, I've learned like if I drop that A and I spelled it kind of like an old English spelling, that I can, it was just like my own IP. I can like get the website, and like I liked it. It gave it a little twist on the name as well.
You present yourself as somebody that has had a huge amount of experience and has already gone down this road, but you're figuring it out as you go. You're a young guy. I mean, as we found out, we both graduated Lenape High School, and it's cool to find an alumni or alumnus that is doing some really neat things. Not to say those other people aren't, but I'm sure when you go back, if you go back to the reunions, you're the cool guy. You know, you're the distillery cocktail guy.
I don't know about that. I haven't been to a reunion yet, actually.
Me neither. I'm right there with you. But my question is, look, I love the way the space is designed. Is that something that the creative side, is that something that comes from you? The furniture, the colors, the way you show the exposed brick, the way you pay tribute to this space, keeping the history. Where does that come in for you?
I think I had a vision for a lot of what I wanted to do, and I've had a lot of help along the way. Like we started off with a designer who actually helped with a lot of the design, and a lot of the like wallpaper and stuff you see in this room. Like she was really instrumental with a lot of that stuff, but we've also had to redo almost every room, and that's not anything she did wrong. It's just like we had a like idea for what the room was going to be used like, and then we got to use it and we're like, oh crap, this is really not. Like this room that we're in now, we actually initially set it up with big tables, like, and it was meant to be like an event space. So we envisioned that we would be doing like bridal showers, baby showers, and different things like that, like every week in this room. And then as we got into it, we're like, this room is like instrumental for us for regular service. So we recently just took out almost all the tables, put in couches and leather chairs and things like that, made it more loungy so we could just see like how it was getting used. But yeah, to answer your question, I think like I had a vision for everything, but like I'm pretty quick to change if I see things. So like it's only been 7 months, but it was just crazy to say, but there's been a lot of change. Like if I go back and look at pictures from like 7 months ago, I'm like, wow, the place has changed a lot.
Where do you get your entrepreneurial spirit from? Do you have any mentors or people that have impacted you for that?
Yeah, so my mom, going back to my mom did dabble in it. She had a frame shop when I was like really little. I have a lot of pictures of her carrying me around as a baby in her frame shop. So I think it's from her. My sister actually owns a bakery, Sunflower Bake Shop. She's in Mount Laurel, now in Marlton actually. So we both seem to have gotten it, and I have two younger brothers who don't want anything to do with it. So it is kind of interesting to see how it's in the family. But I've never really worked for someone else, and I don't think I ever could.
Brewskits, beer grain dog bones, brewskits. Your dog will go wild. Brewskits, beer grain dog bones, a healthy alternative for your pup.
Brewskits are all natural and made in the USA. Visit brewskit.com. That's BREWSCUID.com.
You spoke about your love of whiskey, and you spoke directly to Japanese whiskey, which as an introduction or a gateway, that's pretty unique because it tends to be either Scotch or bourbon. What was it about, or what stood out for you to the Japanese whiskey?
I think it really just started with Japanese whiskey because it was getting like kind of popular at the time, and I just started reading up about it. And when I find an interest, I like to just like soak up all the information I can about something. So I just started reading about it, and the Japanese culture is so interesting. And actually, like you talk about Scotch, but Japanese has like a direct lineage to Scotch whiskey. Like that's where they learned, the initial basically two guys learned from Scotch, and then they went over into Japan and started making it. So, but then in the like typical Japan way, the 1% better, like trying to improve, they tweaked it a little bit, and then made it kind of their own thing.
You're laying down barrels now. You're doing 4 different mash bills or 4 different blends right now. Talk about what people can expect and that potential delivery date as you see it coming down the pike.
Yeah, so we're making 4 kinds of whiskey. So we're making a bourbon, a rye whiskey, a wheat whiskey, and a single malt. So we're doing a lot of things kind of traditional way, but then also mixing it in with like a lot of newer age things. So for me, when I was just thinking about the mash bills, what I wanted to do was I wanted to find like really high quality heirloom grains, and I did a lot of tracking down to find specific varieties of corn and rye that I wanted to use for the whiskey. And then what I did is the mash bills are all 80-20 except the single malt, which is 100% single malt, which is 100% malted barley. They're actually 80-20 because I wanted to highlight these like specific varieties that I went out to find. So our bourbon is my oldest thing right now. It's 7 months and 13 days. I pulled some today and looked it up. So 7 months and 13 days old. I think it's got probably another year and a half at least. So I laid down 7 15-gallon barrels, and then everything else has been going into 30s. And 30s will be our standard, I think, for a while. I'd like to have most stuff in 30s for 3 to 4 years, probably 4 plus.
So you talked about the heirloom grains.
Yes.
And we're in New Jersey. Mm-hmm. Are you sourcing the grains from New Jersey, or are you finding what you're looking for that best suits what your desired end product is? Are they outside of New Jersey?
Yeah, so I want to get them all from New Jersey. So I work with Rabbit Hill Farms, which is great. I get my Mattapique 2-row, so my malted barley for everything comes from them. And I also can get my wheat from them. So I wanted a winter hard red wheat, and they have that. So I get both of them from Rabbit Hill. I love them over there. Just to give you an idea of like how far I chase down for certain varieties. So when I was like early on, like didn't have the distillery yet, was just like messing around R&D with stuff. I read some abstract post somewhere of someone talking about how their uncle used to make bourbon with a certain variety of corn called open pollinated Wapsie Valley. And then I started doing research on it, and I realized like it's higher protein, which protein roughly goes to flavor where carbs roughly go to alcohol. So you'll find most corn, they're just using yellow dent corn. It's just super high in carbs. So it'll create the most alcohol, most efficient, but it's not necessarily going to provide much flavor. So I saw that. I did a lot of research on it. And then I was working with this guy, Larry, who was at his time working on opening like a little mill in North Jersey. And he was like, I've heard of that before. Let me do some research. And he actually tracked it down in the Amish so in PA, and he brought me a 50-pound bag, and I started messing around with it, and I was like, yeah, I really like this stuff. It's really good. And he was like, we can't really get more from them. So I was like, all right. So then I just went on a hunt to find it, and I found a farmer in New York who has it, but he didn't have a mill. So it's not, I don't love the whole process you have to go through now, but I wanted the corn. So he literally sends like truckloads up to this farmer in Maine because he has the rye that I wanted. And then he mills it all, and then they send it down to me. I have a farmer who takes all my grain, all my spent grain, and he feeds it to his farm, to his cows. And so
happy cows.
Yeah. So he's actually looking into right now to grow the 2 for me, and I would love that because then I could get it local, and he could literally drop the grain off. I can do what I need to do with it, and then he can take it back and feed it to his cows. That would be pretty cool.
We need to connect you or check out Bob McDonald of Dancing Star Farms out in Western PA. Okay. Because he's doing a lot of work with different heirloom grains. He's growing, one of the farmers that's growing the rose and rye in Pennsylvania, but he's always experimenting with those heirloom grains as well. What's really exciting and to hear, and your face changes when you start talking grain and farming, and you get excited. I mean, your face lights up. And that I appreciate that, because what you're doing is you said, hey, this is something that you start to research, and then you discover who's making it, how long's it been made, and we come along many of these distilleries that are resurrecting heirloom grains, and what you're doing is you're providing opportunities for farming, which trickles down everywhere. But what it does for you with those whiskeys now, which I can't wait to try in whether it's 7 months or 4 years.
We have a little bit to try.
But, it makes it exciting because you're standing out. And you're, look, there's nothing wrong with number 2, dent corn, and a lot of people use it. But when you talk craft, which is, as a distiller, you're getting down to your craft.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that I think I was 100% sure about out of the gate was like, I do not want to come in, open a distillery and like emulate or try to make like what they're making in Indiana or what they're making in Kentucky. Like they do something very different, and then they're amazing at it. So like, I don't want to come in and try to do that on like a different level. So I came in like already looking at the different varieties of corn. I also bought a centrifuge, which was a huge investment in the beginning, but it allows us to remove the grain before it goes into fermentation so there's no grain in the fermenters or in the still. So corn, malted barley for single malt, it actually lauters. So that's the normal way that's made. For bourbon, like they couldn't separate it. If you've ever tried to like, and I have tried, if you've ever tried to like put it in a straining bag and separate the corn and the actual liquid, the corn just won't give it up. So bourbon traditionally has always been made by bringing the corn along. So it comes into the fermenter and then it comes into the still, and it's just all distilled together. So yeast, corn, and then your like sugar water. So for us, it's part logistics, but it's also part flavor. Is we pull all that grain out in the beginning, we can send it right over to the farmer, and then it's out of our way. And it's just different. You can imagine the difference between when you're cooking it, you're just cooking the liquid, which is, like I said, the sugar water left over from cooking the corn, versus cooking the corn with it all. It's just going to provide different flavor.
Yeah, and then you don't have to spend all that time really cleaning out the fermenter and all that grain and running into some problems that, now you can separate that. And it's very interesting that you already, like I said, it's this mind. And I love listening to you think through every process. Buy a centrifuge. It's expensive, but look at what we can do, and maybe as a time saver and the quality of the product that we're getting from doing that.
Yeah, it's just a completely different product, honestly. And we also, we did start with open top fermenters, wooden open top fermenters. That was definitely something I was really excited about. And then like you start using it, that's like one of the things we changed out because of the realities of just the fruit flies, and we're attached to a tasting room, and it was just like not a realistic option for us. Because one of the other things that we do that isn't kind of the norm is we leave our ferments in there for a pretty long time. So right now they're in there about 12 days. They ferment out completely dry. They get some of that lactobacillus action going at the end. And it makes a really good flavor. as we ramp it up, I think we can get everything we need at about 7 or 8 days. So we're probably going to play around with shortening that. But it was kind of like I had to pick one or the other. You can't leave it in an open top fermenter. So we switched them out and got actual fermenters, just like stainless steel fermenters.
Yeah, and I'm curious as well. I mean, with that fermentation, this being an old building, maybe some things get imparted through maybe a wild yeast, or what could start to collect inside the building, that now there might be some things that become uncontrollable that are going into that ferment that you're kind of scratching your head going, how did that get there, right? Yeah. Besides the fruit flies.
Yeah, I think that's the fun of that. Like, I like embracing nature, so I think that was the draw to the open wood fermenters, is that like you're building up your own biome and you're just rolling with it. And I think it would be great, but I also think it's been okay. So like, since we switched, I have this whiskey, and then the first, like basically our first 3 barrels are from that. And then we switched. We realized pretty early on it wasn't going to be like a good situation long term. So we switched them out, and I'm pretty happy to say that like today I popped some of the other ones and just gave them quick tastes and smells, and they're pretty similar. And that makes sense because those fermenters would have been brand new, so they wouldn't really have had time to build up that biome yet. So yeah.
As you talked about in the beginning, as we sat down, there's been some learning. There's been some learning curves. Have there been other things that have come about that we talked yesterday? You're filling up barrels, and one of them had a little leak. Were there any other experiences, in the beginning, or some things that you run into as you continue to learn and experience?
Oh, there's been so much. So like, but it's all just like you learn as you go. So like the fermenters, which we switched out, and then we switched them out for like conical fermenters, which are more like what breweries use, because it allows the yeast to kind of settle in at the bottom. So initially I wanted to repitch yeast, so that's where the conicals would really help. And I haven't gone down that avenue yet, and I don't know if I will. So that was like, you come in with the best ideas and then you see what happens, right? Even just down to like the pumps, like we were using the centrifugal pump that was electric and you could plug it in, but second it loses a prime, it stops working. So like, and it can't pump yeast. So then you're playing around with like how much you want to leave behind, or if you want the yeast to come with you. So that's a lot of the experimenting that we're doing now. And it's hard because like this is 7 months old, and you can definitely see where it's heading, like the flavor, the nose, all of that. But it's still really hard because it's like, if you make a change now, you're like, am I waiting 3 years to see? And then what happens if I make a change and then I go, you know what? That was better the first way. And you're like, well, I've made 100 or 200 barrels full this way. So that's definitely something that I think a lot about as I'm tweaking things. Like, I feel like I have a really good recipe now and I like where it's all going. So making any tweaks now, it feels like it gets harder.
All right, we're going to take a break. And when we come back, we are going to taste some of these wonderful magic spirits that you have here on the table.
Okay.
Pardon the interruption. Thank you so much for listening to Fermented Adventure, the podcast. Could you do us a favor? Hit that follow button. It makes it easier for others to find us, and it helps us climb in the rankings. Take a screenshot of the podcast, post it, tag us, and let everyone know that you listen to the Fermented Adventure podcast. Now, back to our podcast. We're back here at Wildfether Distilling, and now, Tommy, we're going to taste some of these expressions that you're creating, and the first thing that you've poured for us is this gin. So talk about your gin. I mean, you're a whiskey guy, but now you're making gin. Talk through the ideas and how you brought this to conception.
Yeah, so I kind of, like I said, whiskey is really what I'm excited about, but I wanted to have a gin for the tasting room, and I really started to play around with different botanicals and say what I liked, what I didn't, by tasting different things. And I'm not a big fan of the like piney flavors that come over from juniper. So that was like the first thing I started with, was kind of understanding the juniper and the different things with that. So we did pretty much everything we can with the juniper to make it more sweet and less piney. So we found that if you get the Italian juniper berries, they're actually more sweet, less piney. We actually don't. So most places, they'll throw all the botanicals in with neutral into the pot the night before, and then the next day they'll turn it on and then just distill it from there, or they have a gin basket. We don't cook with any of the botanicals. We macerate for a week with all our botanical bill in there, and then we pull out all the botanicals, and then it goes in the still and gets run. So you're not distilling the juniper either, and we don't crush it. So if you crush juniper, it makes it more piney. So all this stuff makes, we call it an American dry gin, but it's very citrus forward, and it's kind of sweet. And it has that piney, it has the juniper in there, but it's not like, I wouldn't even say it's like a prominent feature of it.
The nose was interesting. I don't think I've ever had a gin that was so fruit forward. A lot of times what we'll experience is, let's say, the citrus notes, the pine notes as you spoke about. But this is a wonderful, it's almost like this wonderful fruit bomb, like Fruit Loops in a way.
Yeah.
But it's not that vehicle. You get the pine notes to that, but then you're also getting this wonderful herbaceousness to it in the nose. And for me, the surprise experience, which I really enjoyed, was my expectation from the nose was the viscosity was going to be thicker. And this is later on the palate. So what this does is it really gets to coat your tongue, but with the ethanols, it disappears. So it's almost like there's a different map on your tongue that are experiencing all these things at the same time. And this is delicious. All right, we're going back to when we came here the first time, Dawn and I, for cocktails, and really enjoyed, by the way, whoever is in charge of your cocktail program, give them a shout out or kudos to them, because I would say the cocktail program you have, Tommy, is equal to some of the high-end cocktail bars you're going to find in Manhattan and Washington, D.C. and Philadelphia. And we get into conversations now with people, but have you tried? And they're like, I didn't even know there was a distillery in Haddonfield. So that's the bar you're going over.
That's cool.
Talk about the components of what those herbs or what you're bringing to those botanicals.
Yeah, and you talked about kind of who made our cocktail menus and stuff, so I do want to give them a shout out. So Ethan actually made Ethan Sherman, he made our first two menus. So he made our initial summer and then our fall menu. And then Rob Scott, he made our winter menu. So I just want to give them a shout out. They've done a great job. All three menus have been really good. So going back to the gin, it's a really simple botanical bill. We put it right on the bottle. So it's juniper, coriander, angelica root, bitter orange peel, and then orris root. So the bitter orange peel is really doing a lot of the lifting for like the citrus, which comes off and it's very fragrant, and you taste it. And then everything else just kind of plays different parts. Like the coriander is always kind of a known pairing for juniper berries. They just kind of fill out the palate very well. And then the angelica root, that brings in the more like rooty, kind of nutty flavors, even kind of fragrant. And then orris root's just a fixative. So it does add some flavors, but its power is in actually just like kind of combining all the flavors together in the drink.
And now this has opened up, so I'm getting more of an experience on the nose, but I'm also pulling out on the palate. There's a creamy texture to it as well. This is exactly why, Tommy, as I said, I've been excited to sit down with you, because there's this real, you're a master at what you're doing. You're a master at this craft. And I'm stopping to say, all right, are you doing a seasonal gin now? Are there other plans to bring in? Because you're talking about your bar staff and what they're doing with tinctures and bitters and shrubs. So are you going to say, all right, we don't need to do a seasonal anything. Let this be the vehicle that gets it there, but then we'll start adding these components.
Yeah. I always say this is gonna be the gin, and then it's kind of the base that we get to work with. But never say never. Like, I could see avenues for doing that, but for right now, this is kind of the base. And then we have a prep team led by Indigo, who makes, like you're saying, all these amazing things and different ideas. And actually, I have one of his things to try that he made. And then like I really want to focus on the whiskey. So like we start with neutral spirit, and then it's wheat neutral spirit, and then we put our botanical bill in. Like I said, macerates for a week. We pull it out, and then we distill it from there. So it's like, I don't know. I didn't want to spend a lot of time on gin, but now it's like this has been such a pleasant surprise that we're making it a lot more than I thought I would, which is a good problem to have. I have absolutely no complaints.
I'll be enthused to try that gin when it finds its way into one of your barrels.
That's 100% in the plans.
Okay.
But I want to put it in my barrels. So like,
of course.
So I'm like, I still got a couple years until I have my own barrels dumped to put some in. Yeah.
I love the orange that's kind of left on your palate afterwards. That's what I keep picking up.
Yeah, that really, it lingers, to your point. Yeah. Look, all I'm saying is we're in South Jersey. So this is, New Jersey is farmland. It's the Garden State. So, a rhubarb gin, if you want to play with that, or something a little bit.
I played with pawpaws for a while.
All right.
One of my friends had a farm and she got me pawpaws. They're a mess to work with. They got pits everywhere and everything. I will say I'll never say never, but yeah, this has been a cool, like, pleasant surprise that people have really liked. I think to me, it's a compliment. We have a lot of people who we had a drink on the first menu that was a watermelon. We like put the gin and into basically put a ton of watermelon in it and infused it. It was called Down by the Bay. And people would always try to order it with vodka, and we're like, sorry, like, we infused the watermelon with it. So like, we don't have watermelon infused vodka. We just have the gin. And we would be like, they're like, I just don't like gin. And we're like, just try it. We'll take the drink back and make you a completely different one if you don't like it. And everyone would try it and then they would love it. So like, that's the biggest compliment to me is like people who don't like gin try it and they're like, oh, I really like this.
It's just delicious. And I don't want to lose sight of the fact that this is a wonderful sipping gin. You don't need to make a cocktail out of this. You could just sit outside. It's getting dusk, or sun setting, whatever's happening, hang out with friends and just drink some gin. This is wonderful.
Thanks. I appreciate it. Yeah. I mean, however you want to enjoy it. It stands up in a cocktail well, but whatever you want.
Well, how are you selling your bottles? Is it only out of your establishment here? Can people find them on the shelves somewhere? How does that work for you?
So my vision and my business model, like I said, things are always up for change, but I feel pretty good about this too, are you familiar with like Treehouse Brewery?
Oh, yeah.
So like I look at their model, they've since blown up and expanded and everything. But for the longest time, it was like you could go there and have a great experience. And then if you wanted to buy any of their beer, you bought it from them. And like I have friends that would drive up that area and they would text all of us and be like, we're going by Treehouse. What do you want us to grab? And they would bring it all back. And I think that's what I'm hoping to build here is like, I don't really want to go the distribution route. I don't want to put it in stores and everything like that. I really would love to just make great whiskey, have people know about it and be able to say like, we're dumping a barrel and then people will come to get a bottle from us, or hopefully get a cocktail, try it, hang out here for a little bit and take a bottle on their way out.
I think it's an interesting way to go because everybody has their own way of doing it. But what you become is this bespoke distillery. And look, if you didn't get that bottle, then don't worry. Maybe 4 or 5 months down the road, that other barrel will be ready. It keeps the excitement going. And for some distilleries, look, there's a lot of enthusiasm for what they're doing. There's a lot of desire for those bottles. But you keep people wanting more versus flooding the market. And then why isn't that store calling me to refill, right? You control the distribution and it becomes an event for when you start adding, releasing these bottles to the world.
Yeah. And it's just a different game. Like if you go the distribution route, you're giving up a certain percentage normally twice and you're playing the volume game where you're just having to actually put down a ton of barrels and get them out and all of that. And I think that's the way most people go. And like, just didn't appeal to me. I was just like, for us, one of my tenets has always been it's kind of flavor over everything else, and everything else tends to be efficiency. So like we do a lot of things that are probably really dumb from an efficiency standpoint, but it creates to us a better flavor, or the flavor that I want. So that's kind of one of the things I definitely prioritize.
Well, you're minutes from the Patco high speed line. So if somebody's coming in from Philadelphia, they could just walk down to your distillery. They don't have to go too far. You're close to Delaware. you're not really that far from New York. So this could be a destination place. And Haddonfield has a lot going on, the restaurants and the shopping. And there are a lot of festivals and activities. So this really fits in perfectly with making this a day and come out here, have a couple cocktails, and go home with a couple bottles, and you're going to be happy you did.
Yeah.
As we have experienced. What's next to try?
All right. So the next thing I want to try is let me just pour it first.
All right. I love the idea. Second to drinking out of a whiskey thief, I get to drink out of a mason jar.
I'm gonna put some in the cup.
Or no, it is. I'm not drinking. Yeah. Thank you for correcting. We're not drinking out of the mason jar. But I think that should be part of the tour. You know, that we'll do like an episode of Moonshiners or something. So talk about. Oh my God! Butterscotch just blew up on the nose.
Yeah, the nose.
Holy cow.
So the nose, and right now the nose and the palate don't match super well. But there is the butterscotch on the palate as well, but it kind of comes on the end. So, all right. So this is our bourbon that we'll be making. So one of the things that, just going with what's different, is like typically for U.S. bourbon, it's corn is kind of like a filler. It's normally like 60% corn or whatever. And then normally there's a flavoring grain. So there's normally a wheat or rye. So normally you're getting some flavoring grain. And then there's mostly low malted barley. So for us, for me, I wanted to highlight like that heirloom grain. So this is 80% corn, 20% malted barley. So high malted barley. We have great malted barley from Rabbit Hill. So I like having that extra, kind of rounds out the flavor. And then it's 80% heirloom grain. So it's going to come off with like a sweetness to it from that. And that I really like.
And how long has this been in that 15-gallon barrel right now?
Yeah, so this is, what did I say, 7 months and 13 days old. Okay, so I pulled it today and I looked up.
I'm still getting the barrel note on the nose. Mm-hmm. It's there. But there's such a, this is, that butterscotch is so pronounced. But then you do get this wonderful sweetness, this corn, almost like like if sugar corn pops had a butterscotch variety to it, I think that would be it.
It's crazy, yeah. And I think one of the things I want to do was use, like I said, instead of flavoring grain, corn is the flavor, and that was really important to me.
This is delicious.
Yeah.
It's fun because this is so young, and obviously not having a chance to try the White Dog to see what characteristics just without the barrel those grains imparted. But this is a wonderful experience, and it is even more, creating that enthusiasm, that anticipation of what this is going to be. So look, you think through every detail. You have a plan for everything. What's the char? Or how are you taking care of those barrels before the juice goes in there? Yeah,
so that was actually one of the things. So on the 15s, I have some 3s and 4s, and I even have a 2 that has wheat whiskey in it right now. But that was one of the things where at a certain point I looked and I'm like, I need to dial back some variables right now so I can kind of get a baseline. So now all of our 30s are char 3s.
Okay.
So this is char 3. But I do have like a char 4 15-gallon as well. So
it does. There is some youth to this. There is some astringency to this that's still there.
But it's delicious.
It really is. I can see where you're going with this.
Yeah.
And look, we talked while we were taking the tour of your distillery. I understand you got to pay the bills. You've invested a lot in your equipment and your time and the facilities here. So you're bringing in those barrels from Indiana, and you talked about this Florida distillery.
Kazuba and Sons, yeah.
Right, but what I can say is that there are a lot of people that go that path, and they kind of get stuck, I think, in not wanting to differentiate from what their customer is expecting from what they've already had.
That was a big concern of mine. So I went back and forth on like maybe just doing like White Dog whiskey and stuff, because I didn't want to bring in those products and then set an expectation that that's what mine were going to taste like, because that was clearly not going to be the case. But at the time, Ethan really helped me get the distillery off the ground on the cocktail side, and we talked a lot about it. And he was just like, it'll be fine. People will understand, and we're mostly using them for the cocktails, and people will understand when you bring out your own thing that this is yours and this is what it's going to taste like. So he helped me out a lot with that. Yeah. One of the other things with this whiskey, with all of our whiskeys, so I said we kind of do flavor over efficiency, flavor over everything else, is we put this in the barrel at 50% ABV. So the max is 62.5. And you'll find most distilleries go in at the max or close to it because that's going to give you the biggest yield off of each barrel, right? So if you go on a 62.5 and then you sell it at 45, let's say, then you add a ton of water and bring it down to 40, 45. And you're going to get, if you have a 30-gallon barrel, you're going to get a lot more out of it. We're putting all of our stuff in at 50, so we're already going in fairly low. And then we're going to actually bottle everything at barrel proof. So basically what you're going to taste is going to be what was in the barrel for the entire time. So we won't add any water. So everything will be slightly different, every barrel, but we're going to do and like I said, this is the best laid plan. So the best laid plans are everything will be barrel proof and everything will be single barrel.
It's interesting because when you use those terms, the consumer is expecting a higher proof product. But look, if this goes in at 45 ABV, 100 proof, all right, with your angel share, all right, this may find its way up to 105. This may find its way up to 110. Or, it could stay around 100.
Yeah,
you just don't
it could
know.
Go lower. I don't really know yet.
We don't know.
No. And for me, and like some stuff, you just have to go off what you like. Like I've drank a lot of barrel proof whiskeys. I've drank a lot at 40. And like I've personally found I don't love the barrel proof. I also don't love the 40s. I like stuff in that like 45 to 52, 55 range. So I think that's definitely part of the reason that I'm like, we'll put it in really low and then we'll bring it right out. I love not having the idea of not adding water and just being like everything you're tasting is aged for the entire time.
There isn't anything you don't think about, is there? Every detail. All right, here's what's going to happen. This is delicious. Mm-hmm. And there's so much character, and I can't wait for this whiskey to continue to grow up. You've got a bomb shelter down in your basement. There used to be bunk beds there.
Yeah.
We're going to build bunk beds. We're just going to become residents of your distillery. Pay no attention to us. We'll sleep here until this barrel's ready, and just enjoy it. And if you need help tasting along the way, and I don't mind picking up a bag or two of grain and doing that, but kudos to you, and kudos to your vision. And I think that what I would also say is you are differentiating yourself from the masses. And there are masses that are differentiating themselves. So what you get to do here today is your own experience of what you want your customer to have. But I love the path you're on.
Thanks.
I really
appreciate that.
I really do. So, all right, there's a bottle labeled Fernet, or there are cans there. Which way would you like us to go next?
Let's do this. We'll do the Fernet.
And that was funny. That was fun too, because we saw these things on your menu that you're creating an absinthe. You're doing a Fernet. What other expressions do people get to experience when they come into Wildfether?
Yeah, so this is where I have to give a shout out to Indigo. He is our head of our prep team, and like he just dreams things up and tries them. Some work, some don't, but most of them work. So you can see this is actually Fernet 3. So this was the third one. The first two didn't hit the mark that he wanted. But I wanted to kind of bring this one out and highlight it because Fernet, he found a recipe from the 1800s of how they made Fernet, and then we had to modify things. Like there was viper flesh in there and opium, so we didn't put that stuff. Yeah, we didn't put that stuff in these ones, and even things like some rare Italian mushroom that we couldn't get. So we kind of made different tweaks, but we still left the base of the recipe. And what's cool is this just ends up being something that people can try that they maybe haven't experienced. And so
he's not getting this back.
I didn't think I was.
it's really good. Yeah. So, and like where it gets used. So for our menu now, we have a drink called Philadelphia, and it has, it shouldn't work. It has rye whiskey, absinthe, and Fernet in it. And with a, with a whole egg.
Wait, with a whole egg?
Yeah, so a flip has a whole egg in it. So yeah, so it has a whole egg, and it also has a pecan orgeat in it. I'm trying to remember it all off the top of my head. So like the Fernet is one of those things that like it just provides a really great flavor with that, and allows us to make these cocktails that are kind of innovative, but I also think they're still pretty approachable. Like, people can come in, and even if you're not really into cocktails or into spirits, you'll still find the drink really good.
So what, you left things out of this recipe. I'm tasting baking spices, and I'm thinking clove, but there's also a very sweet component to this. Mm-hmm. What is this Fernet 3 that isn't? You don't even know. You're like, I have no idea.
Yeah, that's
truthfully, I picked up a bottle.
That needs to be bottled.
Yeah, we haven't bottled any of this stuff. It's stuff me and Indigo have talked about because we just use smaller batches right now. Especially this. This isn't even distilled. It's just macerated. But I asked him before, when I knew I was going to do the podcast, I said, hey, can I bring on one of your things? I wanted to highlight what he was doing because he does a really good job with it, and like, all I did was give him the freedom, and he's kind of taking it and ran.
That's probably one of the best Fernets I've ever had. Honestly.
That's awesome. Oh, he'll be so happy to hear
that.
I
would say that as well. This is wonderful to where I think craft is, because now you have distilleries that are focusing on things like Fernet and Amaro and aperitifs, and you mentioned
absinthe.
Absinthe, thank you. Wow, whatever that proof is right now on the whiskey. Yeah. So it's that point where, as you said, look, in New Jersey, everything that is supposed to come from behind the bar needs to come from here, or at least in New Jersey somewhere.
Yeah.
It has to originate.
No, so it's just you have to, like, the way it's written is very vague, but you're just supposed to make everything in-house. So you're supposed to make all the components in-house, but it's very vague and very gray.
Yeah, I mean, there's that gray area to everything. But then you come across and you produce this Fernet. This is like, I would covet this bottle. I really would.
Please put that in.
Yeah, so but it's crazy. For now, like, literally, if you want to try the Fernet, I mean, you can come and you can get a neat pour Fernet. Sure, I don't know if we've had people do that yet, but right now it's in the, like, what we do, it is a little crazy sometimes when I sit down and think about it, but it's working. It's like, we went through 3 variations of this, made this Ferment that tastes really good, and then it's in one seasonal cocktail right now.
And the color is beautiful.
Yeah.
Like, it's a beautiful amber color.
All right, so you mentioned, obviously, the gin and some of your whiskeys. What else can the consumer buy or come for bottles for today?
Yeah, so right now we sell our vodka, our gin, and then we sell our sourced rye and our sourced bourbon that we bring in and we use for the cocktail room. What else do we sell? The big thing for us actually has been canned cocktails.
Okay.
So we started making canned cocktails. We have 4 flavors we do now. So we basically have just been taking cocktails that people have really loved in the cocktail room and then making them into canned cocktails. So the first 2 were Win-Win and the Flower Power, and they were more like floral and sweeter ones. So this go around, we just added House of the Setting Sun, which is our red bell pepper drink that I was kind of talking about before. And then we added Pain and Piety, which is a spicy pear. So we saw them in 4.
Say that again.
Pain and Piety. It's a spicy pear.
All right, I thought you said painted potty.
Pain and Piety. I don't even name them. I love whoever
so
makes
it's like
them.
potty.
Piety, yeah.
Oh, piety. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
I must have been my South Jersey accent.
No, it is, which is pretty much proper English, if you ask me.
Yeah. So the canned cocktails, they've been just great, and you can, if you want, you can try one. I figure you guys can take the other ones with you too. But the canned cocktails have been cool. So they're in 8-ounce cans. We initially were going to do, our initial plan was to do cocktails to go. So like we would still make them and everything. And then we would, like, we bought these, like, they look like shampoo bottles. So we would put them in, they had 2 cocktails in them, and then you would take them with you. But there was a couple things, it was hard to price because it was really like our cocktails that were in-house. And also, like, there was just no control once they left. Like, if they put them on ice, if they diluted them, any of that. And so I wanted to make sure that every time someone took something to go, it still tasted like great in the way we wanted it to. So this was another thing, another trial and error, but we've played around with just like making these cocktails, getting them into cans and everything like that. And the feedback has been really good. So yeah.
What is the future? You talked about you have a new space, larger still, I would imagine.
Yeah.
But what you've got this vision, this plan. Some of this is happening faster than you expected or anticipated. But what is your overall, if I were to say, Tommy, where do you see yourself in 5 years?
Yeah, so what's happening with the expansion is we got the warehouse in New Jersey. You can only have one production facility. So for us, the warehouse is actually just providing storage of barrels, because we're running out of room for that, and we can bottle there. So for us, we'll make everything here, roll the barrels, truck them over to this warehouse. It's not far away. It's like 5 minutes away, and then they'll get stored there. When they're ready, we'll dump them and we'll bottle them. And then what will be nice is we can bring the bottles over as we need them and kind of remove that from here. So, and then like with that expansion, I'm putting the order in like today. We're putting in, so currently we have 128 gallons still, and that's that'll become our finishing still, and then we're getting a 400 gallon still. So
wow.
Yeah. So it'll allow
Column?
us to, what?
Is there a column
No,
still?
so everything's double pot stilled for
Okay.
us. Same idea, like I want max flavor and everything like that. So we're getting a 400 gallon pot still from Specific as well. So that will, right now, just with me, because I'm the only one doing the distilling, that'll allow me to double my output. And then if I bring in another person, I'll be able to quadruple it. So it'll be a nice little bump.
All right, Sonia Hunt, ABV Jobs. She will be able to help you to fill that space, that role, if I don't apply for it first. Because if there's anybody that I would love the opportunity to learn from, honestly, Tommy, I mean, the skill and the ideas and the experience you already have, I think that would be so valuable to mentor somebody and to share that. As well as, look, if there's any budding bartender wannabes or people that really want to learn the craft of bartending, this is a great place. And obviously you don't want to be tripping over people on a busy Saturday night, but I think that what you're going to learn is you're going to learn the right way first and learn what flavors are and how to make a good craft cocktail. And this is for those city, people, for Haddonfield that said, you better get in before somebody else does. I think they're so lucky that you did, because this is a gem. This is a treasure for Haddonfield and the South Jersey area. Tommy, is there anything we haven't talked about on the podcast today? Anything you want to share about you or Wildfether or any anecdotal stories?
No, I don't think so. I think we got it all.
I think we did. Look, thank you for being a friend of Fermented Adventure, but I have to tell you, this is a destination. If you're anywhere in the South Jersey area and you're looking for something to do, a new experience, Wildfether Distilling, you're not going to be disappointed. Do you do any live music or any entertainment right now, or is that in the plan?
I don't know. So our space is a little broken up with it being an older house. My philosophy so far has been to really try to keep it about the drinks and like kind of the general experience and everything. So far we've just been doing that. All
right, but you never know, because like you had said, things could change. You're very flexible, you're very malleable to new ideas, but truthfully, this space, come for a couple cocktails, just relax, and you've got these beautiful, wonderful restaurants in Haddonfield. You can really make this a whole day. Tommy, thanks again. This has been awesome. I've been looking forward to this. Dawn and I have been raving about your distillery and your tasting room and your bar program, and we only can anticipate even better things coming down the pike.
Thanks a lot. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.